Today's session will be recorded, so just letting everyone know that, and we'll be sharing that recording along with these slides to all participants this afternoon, together with a little survey of our own to see whether or not this webinar was of value to you. And we certainly appreciate the feedback about how today goes, but as well any other information you would like from Study New South Wales. So without further ado, I'll launch straight into things. So Lyndall, if you could click over to the next slide. Before I go on, I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this virtual meeting from the lands of the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this meeting. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. Next slide. So today we will be planning to take you through, as I say, some information about the latest results on the International Student Sentiment Tracker. Before we go to those results, I'll be offering on behalf of Study New South Wales a bit of an update about the latest from our perspective and what's coming up. Now that I have your attention, and then we'll go, as I say, into a bit more of a deep dive around the results from New South Wales as compared to the national side of things. We would also love your help in promoting the existing survey to students that's out, and that will comprise the Q3 survey. And yes, so we'll get to that towards the end of the presentation, and of course have some time at the end for any Q&A. If you do have questions that you'd like to ask throughout the session, my colleague Katie Hanna is also on the line and in the chat and is able to address questions then. Otherwise, feel free to hold them till the end and we'll try and take them at that point. Next slide. Thanks, Linda. So a few updates from the Study New South Wales perspective. Obviously, this is front of mind. We're all thinking about it. We're all following the media very closely, but I want to reassure the audience that the safe return of international students is very much our #1 priority. You would have seen from the extensive coverage on this issue that all our political leaders have emphasised just how important this is to the New South Wales government. Our Premier, our Treasurer, who wrote an op-ed that was published in the SMH last week, multiple senior ministers right across the government are united in wanting to get international students back to our shores. And we're working through that with the multiple layers of government and stakeholders involved in this process. So in the meantime, we're making sure that we're going to be on the front foot, developing a communication strategy for the time when the plan does eventually come to fruition. So, and also publish on the website some frequently asked questions, which we're receiving from international students in order to fill that vacuum, because we know that in the absence of communication, people, of course, will make up their own stories. So we want to be, again, on the front foot and have some information out there to assure everyone that we are focused on this issue and how it's working. So if you haven't already hopped on the website, or if you want to share that with your student cohorts and agent cohorts, we do have this page. We are updating it, and we will continue to do so as more information comes to light. And it's just, I think, a real call to action to make sure that everyone is signed up to our social media channels and to our newsletter to be the first to know as we have more to report on this issue, but also more broadly the programs that we deliver to support international students. With everything that's going on, we want to make sure at Study New South Wales that everything that we do is aligned and supportive of what the sector is engaged in as well. So we have a couple of surveys out in the field at the moment. They do close this afternoon, but if you haven't seen them, and if you would like to share your views about some of the priorities that we should be pursuing as state government, we do very much welcome your feedback. So there is an industry survey with links in this presentation, as well as a student-facing survey, both of which we're keen to hear back on, and we are breaking down the results to feed into our an updated version of the strategy to cover the next couple of years as we emerge from this very, very challenging period. So if I could ask for your help, if you do have insights that you'd like to share with us, please do fill out these surveys. And again, these slides will be shared with you after the presentation, so you'll be able to click on them there. The Study in Australia Onshore Sentiment Survey is the third iteration of that, is also out in the field. We're of course presenting on the Q2 results in this presentation, but to continue to get feedback that's meaningful and provides us with insights over time, the Q3 survey is out in the field. Please help us get the word out there. Linda was saying that we've had about 200 results so far from New South Wales. It's not bad, but we can certainly do a lot better. And obviously the more students that fill this out, the better our insights and the more meaningful the data. So thanks in advance for your assistance with that. And we have various social media tiles out there that you can share with the world to help us gather those results. So thank you. Next slide, please. The other, I think, good piece of news, if I can share it, is that we have our partner projects applications are now open. So these are projects that we co-fund and deliver in partnership with the sector each year to support the international education sector and have a particular focus on trying to enhance the student experience. Of course, our students these days are not only onshore, but many have been stuck offshore. So we are looking at projects which can support students in all areas. I encourage you to hop onto our website. The link is there as well to see, find out more about the guidelines. But in essence, we are looking to address market failures and gaps and bring the sector together under consortium of partners who can deliver projects to support the student experience and support the sector more broadly in its recovery. So as I say, we put up to $110,000 per project, but we expect partners to also contribute either kind or in cash, the same amount, at least the same amount of money to that. The applications are open until early May, so please do bring your partners together if you've got a good idea and want to submit an application. We look forward to hearing from you. The other nice development in the last few weeks has been the publishing of an international student health hub. This was a partner project that we delivered with New South Wales Health and other partners in one of our earlier rounds. And it's actually a really wonderful resource to help students here and offshore navigate the local Australian health systems. It has a sexual health lens over it to really help students and demystify some of the issues around that, because we had picked up that that was an issue among international students, but there are also some broader points there about health and navigating the health system here as an international student, which isn't always easy. So hop on the link. It's a really beautifully prepared and curated site, and it has been developed in consultation with international students who fed into this. So hop online and share that among your networks, because it is something that we think can help students, particularly during this period. The other thing I thought is nice to note as well, obviously in this time of need, helping our international students is front of mind, and one of the important things that we're doing, especially to address those cost of living issues, is distributing free food hampers. So we've made available more than 70,000 food hampers over the last few months. We still have at least 50,000 of those available to hand out. They are free, they're worth at least $80 each, and can really help students meet their finance, I suppose, yeah, save money and continue to put food on the table if they are finding that a bit of a challenge. We have lots of partners right across the state handing these out, so please hop online. There's a form and a number that students can call to find out where they can collect that food. So a nice call to action to help those students who still really need us on shore. And the other final update I just wanted to share was that we are, over the next few years, looking to grow our team. One of the important areas where we're looking to do that is in the digital advocacy space, to help my colleague Katie get those messages out to the students both onshore and offshore, and promote the state as a study destination, promote the many programs that are available out there for international students. So one of these roles is currently being advertised, and there's a link there. Applications will close in early April. So if you know of someone who's keen to help us grow awareness of New South Wales as a study destination and promote our virtual, online and digital comm space. We'd love to hear from them. So there you go, the link's there, and share far and wide. So that's it from there. Lyndall, if you could hop to the next slide. I will now hand over to my colleague Lyndall Jacker over at Edified, who will walk us through the results from the last survey that we had out in the field and what it means for New South Wales. As I say, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. We can take those at the end with Lyndall's assistance, or Katie and I can try and address them in the chat as we go. So that's it from me again. Thank you for joining in today. And Lyndall, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks Toshi, and thanks Katie as well for making this all happen in the background. And look, it really is wonderful to be back again in sharing the results around what are our international students saying here on shore as we look to capture their feedback. Now, there's quite a bit that I'll be covering through, but for those who didn't join us when we shared the July results, what we're really looking at is understanding how our students are feeling and how they're sourcing their information. And we look at areas around their sentiment towards Australia, what are their concerns, where are they getting their information from, and then also each quarter we got a topic that we focus in on specifically. So just a lot of detail up here, but Katie has said that these slides will become available. So I'm just going to be pointing out a couple of key aspects as we go through. Now, I think first and foremost is that for the last two waves, we've had over 10,000 students respond nationally, which is a great response. And no surprise though, in October, we had less students respond, and because there was survey fatigue, it was an exam period for some, and I think like all of us, we were probably all just generally fatigued along with our students. But in terms of New South Wales' share of national response, you can see the numbers up there on the screen. So over 880 in quarter two, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. And how have there been any shifts from what we saw in quarter one? And there has been, because it makes sense, because you know the whole circumstances had changed. But I do want to do a big shout out to all of you on this call. For those of you who distributed and shared and promoted this survey, we cannot thank you enough, because this is what gives us this level of feedback about how students are feeling. And as I said, in quarter one, in July, we focused specifically on COVID. And then in quarter two, I think what was really important, we looked at student support services, as well as a secondary focus around employment. And that's feeding into what we're looking at currently in quarter three, in understanding a bit more employment rights. But I'll be talking about that more as we go through. But I think it really comes down to why are we doing this? And this is to capture how students are feeling and giving them that platform of sharing their feedback. Now, before sharing the results, I think it's always important to be looking at who responded, because that does provide context in terms of what some of the answers may be and how they're feeling. Now, majority of the students you can see there are currently living in Sydney. We had slightly less females, though there's still a skew towards females, and we had a slightly older cohort in October. And also just wanted to point out, you know, nearly 1 in 4 students arrived in New South Wales in 2020. So again, they are having a very different experience because they hadn't had that time to adapt, unlike maybe students who had been here for a bit longer. So those needs and their experience can really differ depending on who they are. And then also, of course, is looking at what institution type they're at, where's their sector. And you can see between July and October, we did have a shift, and it was fantastic to be able to get a greater voice from our RTOs and understanding what the experience is for students in the private colleges. But you do see a skew particularly towards university, as I said, particularly towards postgraduate. On the right-hand side, I'm just showing the nationality breakdown. And October was great to see a higher proportion of Chinese students responding, though I do have to acknowledge that they are underrepresented compared to the actual population of Chinese students. Possibly a couple of reasons there. Some never got back into Australia when the borders shut, and also based on my experience, not only with Edified, but also as my time with IDP Education as the head of research there, Chinese students are less likely to participate in surveys. I just wanted to note that this survey is conducted in English only as well. So again, this just highlights all the differences in who our students are and what their needs may be. So looking as to what changed between July, which is the green bar, and October, which is the blue bar. And this is looking at their student sentiment towards Australia, and I'm just focusing here on those in New South Wales. And it's a good story. We can really see students they were feeling more positive about their experience or towards Australia. And that's more so because they were starting to feel more safe and secure here. Now, I know how much everybody loves a little bit of interstate comparison, and in July, New South Wales was sitting at the lower end in terms of sentiment towards Australia, but you can see there this positive shift we're seeing in scores just to be on par now with other states and territories. Now, not only looking at overall level, we drilled down into specific factors that are related to education in Australia. And as I said, you can see there that improvement about students. They don't feel as unsafe or insecure, which is really good. And we saw that come through from students from China, Brazil, and English language students. However, what you can see there is that half the students remain worried about their future prospects. And no surprise, that really comes through more from postgraduate students, as well as we're seeing those from China. But I suppose that's part, just part of the story. And look, this is not just New South Wales. This is across nationally. We're seeing a very similar trend. And I think it's important when you sort of start to look down what does that mean in terms of the students' behaviour? Are they still intending to stay here despite these concerns? And on a positive note, you can see there 3 and 4 still intend to complete their studies here in Australia, and that is very much driven around Australia's education as well as the lifestyle and safety. But of course, it's times of uncertainty, and we've got 1 in 10 students still unsure of what they're doing. But we see that much higher amongst English language students, again, possibly reflecting just the uncertainty that's sitting within that sector as a whole. Now, the other thing, while they're low numbers, there is an increase of students in New South Wales who are looking to return home. It's from 7% to 11%. But again, this is just, something to monitor and watch. And I'm particularly interested in what we're going to see come through with the study that's currently in field now. And before I go into a little bit more of what's there, I do want to let you know this quarter we've added in a new code, and to understand not only if students are intending to return home, but are they intending to go to another country as well. So that will give us a better picture of maybe what students' intentions are. Now, those who are looking to return home, there's the top 3 reasons there, pretty similar to what we saw last quarter about a poor experience studying online, the cost of being able to affordability, and that, challenges around getting part-time work. But I think there's something here that we've really got to watch as well, and that's not feeling welcome. And we do see this come through more from Chinese students and probably other students of Chinese background, but I couldn't break it down by those levels because we just didn't have a large enough sample size in our survey to be able to talk about it. But I think we do, these are also some of the concerns that students are talking about as well, even those who are intending to stay. And before I actually show you the data behind this, I think it's really important to just read some of the concerns students are talking about, because we ask them, to provide more detail and how it's affecting them. And it just blows my mind, like the level of detail and comprehensiveness that they write their stories. I mean, as I've had over 10,000 responses, I've probably felt I've read most of those as well. And, you know, some of them are heartbreaking, some of them amazing, that their resilience, but I think it really does bring to life of what their experience is. And it very much is, while COVID maybe got better, the negative consequences of that more broadly are still feeling challenged. And I do have, this is probably one of my favorite quotes I've seen from a Chinese, it was from a Chinese student, that just sort of wraps up that, you know, return on investment for Zoom uni. And I think, you know, we're all experiencing Zoom and how we feel about it. And if that's how you're getting education, your education, it may be sort of starting to wear a little bit thin. But of course, now looking at the data, because that's, you know, it backs all this up. And I'm first just going to start there. You'll see in the middle COVID, and of course that's been the biggest drop between July and October, which is great news. But you know, there's still 1 in 3 are concerned in New South Wales, and that's sort of relatively high compared to some of the other states. Again, this was back in, and we've got to remember this was back in October when we did this survey. And also, there's still half of the Chinese students were worried at that time. So, you know, again, we've got to keep that in mind. But sitting there at the top, of course, is employment issues and financial challenges. Those top 2 factors have not changed. Again, showing the broader impact of what COVID, how it's affecting our students. I think probably one of the big ones I wanted to draw about for New South Wales that came through specifically was, you know, the challenges sitting around accommodation. And that, of course, you know, it's not a standalone factor. It is mixed up with, you know, I can't get a job, you know, I'm struggling to pay. And, you know, we know Sydney's one of more expensive places to live. So again, some of those challenges that get wrapped up within that. So again, it's just being mindful, and as we go through a little bit more, you'll see this accommodation underlying some of the other feedback that we've got. But before going into that, I just wanted to go back to employment issues, because we looked at that in more detail in quarter 2 in October. And because this was a new topic, you'll notice that the dark blue bar is national results, and then I'm showing the light blue, which is very appropriate for New South Wales. And just to give you some sort of, I suppose, context of where the results came in. And no surprise really, students are most concerned in terms of employment about their future, as well as finding a part-time job. But of course, once you start looking down at some of the different cohorts, it does vary. And you can see there, and I mean, it's not really a surprise, future career is around postgraduates, but getting an internship and work placement really, it really came through for university students, because some are saying, you know, I can't get my degree, I can't qualify unless I get that internship or work placement. So the challenges that sit around that. Our TAFE students, you know, just really struggled with those reduced hours or shifts that they were getting. And worryingly, we are seeing, you know, students from the Philippines not understanding their employment rights and responsibilities. And as I said, in quarter 3, that's something we really want to explore in more detail. Another point I wanted to bring up that's not highlighted here, but 1 in 4 students in New South Wales with employment concerns, they raise at least one issue regarding workplace discrimination or exploitation. And I think, you know, if you're not aware, there's a great study done by the Migrant Worker Justice Initiative, and that came out last July, titled As If We Weren't Human. And I think that really explores that a lot more, and we know international students, without a doubt, are wrapped up within that. And again, something that we're conscious of, and how we can help understand more in where they're finding their information. Which, speaking of which, and I realise a lot of numbers on this slide, so don't worry too much about that. You can digest this at your own point. But this is about how students searched for, or those searching for information about their concerns, which we just saw. Are they finding the information they needed? And what we saw, employment, as we know, you know, 2 in 3 students, that's their top concern. and half of them are not finding the information they need. So I know in employment, when you start unpicking it, there's a lot under that, from finding a part-time job to my future, to am I being exploited or for suffering, experiencing discrimination. But again, it just shows how important it is that we can communicate and making sure that's accessible. And though while it has dropped, it still is a high proportion. I think it's interesting, we know like the COVID situation has improved, but students still are who are worried about it, are searching for information. And as I said, half of the Chinese students are still worried about COVID, or as I said, back in October they were. So they're still searching for information. There's still there was a rising proportion who couldn't find what they needed. So it's just that importance of keeping that information updated and available. Now, on a positive note, as we saw, more students had accommodation concerns in New South Wales. The good news, though, is more were finding the information they needed about it, which is great, because we know, it comes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and food and shelter are so important to enable them to study, which leads me neatly into student support services. And that was a new topic of focus, as I mentioned. And again, what we're seeing here, compared to the national average, students in New South Wales were less likely to access support services. So we had just over half access services, and no surprise, the essential need for food was the most used service, followed by financial assistance. And we've just seen Toshi mention about more food hampers available, and I think it just goes to show that this is just so important. I think also you'll see there was increased use of accommodation services, whether it be assistance or emergency or temporary housing. So wonderful to see that this was available and also used by students. And we see that most notably coming through from English language and our public and private college students, as well as those from India. So really just helping enable them to continue their studies here, which, as we know, is just, it's so important. And just to, I think, support, another fact is that we had, about over half of the students were willing to say who they got their support from. And of course, they mentioned their education provider, they mentioned Study New South Wales or the New South Wales government, but also you can see just some of the charities and organisations there. So this is not just one organisation alone. It just demonstrates how important is the collaborative effort at all levels in enabling students to know that they can get this support. And we did see that of those who did get financial support or assistance, most of that was done by the education provider. So again, a thank you to all of you for supporting students in their time of need. Now, just want to, I suppose, re-emphasise the importance of student support services, because what we do see here, you can see on the right-hand side, the blue bar is those students who did not access support services and their sentiment towards Australia. And then the green bar are those who did access support services and they had a stronger sentiment towards Australia. So again, it's sending the message that we're supporting them, and, counterbalancing some of that negativity about not feeling welcome here. So I think it just shows that the more we can do in that space, and again, referring to what Toshi talked about earlier, making it available, and really is about how we can expanding that reach. Because I think one of the important things here we saw, as I said, only about half of the students, nearly half didn't access support services in New South Wales. And we saw this, it was much higher amongst Nepalese students. You can see on the screen there, 64%. Now, understandably, for some, they're self-sufficient, they didn't need support, or, altruistic, I love it, they go, others need it more than me. And there is, for some, a general lack of awareness. But I just did want to draw out that, 1 in 3 students in New South Wales did not believe services were available to them. And that was above the national average. And I've heard anecdotally that some of this is when students heard at a national level that they weren't getting, they weren't able to access national funds, let's say JobKeeper or that type of thing. There may have been thinking that nothing was available to them. So I think, that I said, that's anecdotal, but the more that we can do to get out there and spread the word and using all your networks, whether professional or personal, and reaching students of where they can get help and it's okay to ask for help, can only just support them in the most positive way. So of course that sort of leads me on to communication channels. And for those of you on this webinar today, I can imagine most of you are education providers, and you are the most important source, the main source for where students go, or at least the first port of call around student support services. And that's mostly, of course, university students and to a certain extent the TAFE students. Interesting though, those students from English language or private providers, they're more relying on social media. So again, that just shows you it's not one rule fits all. We need to be having a multi-channel approach in how we spread the message about what support and access for international students. And you can see even there the education provider. The education agent. And having worked for IDP, I know just how powerful the counsellor-student relationship can be. So again, another important resource. Now, when I talk about employment issues, it's where students are finding information. Again, the education provider comes through, and but again, it's not just one. Now, I do find this interesting, and I can't conclusively report this, but the analysis would suggest that if it's things like future work opportunities, where to find part-time work, so more at that level, students are going to the education provider or a student-centric organisation. When it comes to things more around discrimination, exploitation, understanding work rights, that's where we'll see a higher usage of the government sources, I'd say, such as Fair Work Ombudsman, Department of Home Affairs, Tax Office, that type of thing. So again, it's no one size fits all here. It is that multi-pronged approach that's needed, or referencing students and making sure that there's consistency in where students are being referred to in terms of information. And, I think we saw nearly 4 in 10 said the information that around employment was helpful. We did see it was more helpful those that got from, say, Fair Work Ombudsman and that aspect, because it's very specific of what they're looking for. But again, just shows there's more work that we can all continue to do as a sector in supporting our students in this space. And finally, and again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but we also just ask students generally, and we asked this in Q1 and we asked in Q2 and we'll be again in Q3, what are their top 3 preferences in where they want to, how they want to be kept up to date with key issues here in Australia. And again, you can see that the education provider sits there clearly at the top. Now, the other thing that was really interesting, and this happened across all states and territories, it wasn't specific to just one, is you can see there's a lot of shift going on. Now, we did add in a new code this time, but my hypothesis here is essentially students, it's hard to say what I would prefer if it's not already available. So what they're responding in what was available at the time. So in July, this was of course, earlier days when COVID was happening, we had a lot of government information. There was a lot of news coverage, media, on the TV, announcements and that, whereas by October it had shifted, and you can see the rise of email newsletters. Now that may be more coming from the education provider, from Studying New South Wales, and that's how they were keeping themselves up to date. So again, students are very responsive to what's coming through at the time in how they're consuming their communications. and information. And again, you'll just see that importance of social media, particularly we see it coming through from the private college students. And this is why it's great ensuring that we do get, good sample sizes from different sectors, because you can start to see those differences in behaviours. So look, that was a real sweeping, quick run through what the international students were reporting back to us in October last year, and I really feel like it was a tale of two stories. There's such goodwill towards Australia. This is what they've invested in an Australian education, and they're looking for that outcome. But at a personal level, it's tough. They are struggling. And I think it's just, we've still being mindful of the broader impact that COVID-19 is having on them, both at, at a financial level, but also as at a personal level, because not only, of course, are they worried about their own situation here, but for many students, of course, the COVID situation is still it's really bad in some countries, their home countries. They're worried about their family, their friends. And I'm really interested in what we're going to see coming in this quarterly results. We're conducting it right now because it's been 12 months since COVID's happened. Students, they haven't seen their families for more than 12 months, and we don't know when they will again. So this uncertainty is certainly, is sitting there on their mind. And I think, well, what does that mean for us? And again, there's a lot up there, but I suppose when I sort of think about it, and as I said, we've got students starting a new year, it's 12 months on, and we're starting to hear, that question about the value of an Australian education. And so it's really is important that we continue to reinforce their decision to stay here and to complete their studies, and that we are committed to their well-being, employment opportunities, their career outcomes, and of course their academic success. So I think anything that we can be doing just to encourage that, replaying that to them and making them feel welcomed. Tosh has talked about some of the great work that Study New South Wales is doing, and I know everyone, an education provider and also our accommodation providers. It's just, as a sector, we've got to keep doing what we're doing. And probably one of our biggest challenges is engaging with the broader community, helping work with the narrative about, again, as I probably say, that they're welcome, and promoting those available support services, because as we see, they are still critical to ensuring that our students' welfare is being supported, and that they can continue to do their studies. Of course, it's an ever-changing situation, so it's keeping our students updated, and particularly anything about what's going to happen with borders and that. And I don't need to tell you that because I know that will be coming. But I think if I was to sum everything up, and just to help with this sense of belonging and for our students, is just to continue to engage and communicate more with them. Because our students here onshore, it's about understanding their needs, acknowledging their personal value, not their economic value, and their experience and contribution, because really at the end of the day, we all know this, they are our best brand advocates that we can have into attracting future or prospective students to come to Australia. So finishing up on that, where are we now? I think we've said it 1,000 times, but yes, the current survey is out in field, and as I said, we really are wanting to tap into more about understanding what their international students' employment rights are, where they're sourcing information, and what for, because I think that's sort of that next depth of detail that we need. And as always, your support in distributing and promoting it to sort of all the various sectors that we can have is just fantastic, because that means that we can really drill down to where some of those differences are, and making sure that our information and our communication can be tailored and hit the level that's needed to support our students here. So that was a lot from me. Thank you. I don't know whether there's any questions. I'm going to show this wonderful slide at the end and hand back to Katie in a moment, but I just do love to acknowledge the social distancing that is happening in this slide. So well done, Study New South Wales.
Thanks, Lyndall. Really comprehensive presentation, and yes, with we're all celebrating the fact that a lot of the restrictions are easing, but we must do our part to continue that we stay safe. So look, just a call to action from all of us. Our links and social media, digital channels are all up there. Help us get the word out about the programs that we're running. As Lyndall pointed out, education providers remain that key nexus, the key connection point between students and the programs running out there to support them. So help us get the good word out there about the stuff that we're doing. Look, I haven't seen any questions come through yet, Lyndall, but I do want to invite those on the line to either take themselves off mute and ask a question or chat something into the chat function if you do have any particular questions for Lyndall or for the Study New South Wales team. So I'll just hold for a second to see if there are any questions.
Toshi, what I might do is I might just stop sharing the screen so I can put my face on, just so people know, there is a person that's sitting behind all that as well. As my camera goes on.
Perfect. Yeah, no, absolutely. Good idea. We are still people behind these cameras. So
yes.
Anybody has any questions? No questions?
No, absolutely. You guys were amazing as always and left nothing to imagination. So everything is very clear and out there. And the fact that we will get a copy of these beautiful slides and numbers would be amazing. In my part, I'm very happy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for your feedback, Beryl. All right, well, on that note, yes, we will certainly have all of this, package up the recording, package up the slides, share the surveys and the links with you. And look, we will try to endeavour to get the Q3 results when they're available out to you guys as well as soon as we can. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your ongoing support. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.